The bipartisan infrastructure bill will create a new research agency in the transportation department, but that agency would operate without civil service job protections. Lisa Rein is a reporter at the Washington Post. She covers federal agencies and the management of government. Lisa, welcome.
So much for having me.
So this is called ARPA-I, which is the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Infrastructure. It sounds like a great idea. It's essentially the DARPA of transportation. So why not offer job protections that other federal workers enjoy?
Right. It's the DARPA, as you said, and I think it's also modeled on what is called in government speak ARPA-E, which is a similar agency that started at the Energy Department to do advanced research there and that started, I think, around 2009, 2010. So the reason really gets that these agencies are being created kind of outside of the normal civil service system is really simply one of a desire for expertise and quick hiring in a hiring environment that is really, I think, agreed by all to be a kind of a failed system. So obviously the infrastructure bill is a priority for President Biden, and Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg wanted this kind of, I think of it as kind of a research think tank, inside the Transportation Department that will hire experts to guide them on how to, issue grants efficiently, the state governments, local governments who are getting the grants, the contractors who are employed, how they can, build bridges and roads better and more efficiently, and saving energy and all kinds of, and with the newest research. The problem is you need really qualified scientists, data people, engineers to carry out something like this. And the real problem that they came up against is something that every agency deals with, sadly, which is that it takes months and months and months to hire people. If you go through the traditional job board, USA Jobs, which so many people watching this show are familiar with, it can take months and years to be hired. Then, you also have to kind of account for veterans' preference, which is still very much a policy of the government and has been since the Obama administration. And the veterans, if somebody is a qualified veteran, they have to be hired over someone who is a non-veteran, and that gets very complicated. As much as people, don't want to talk about, the elephant in the room there, I think that agencies get frustrated because sometimes they do find veterans who are not the best fit.
So Lisa, it's true. Proponents say, look, these are high-level scientists and engineers. The government needs to bring them in quickly. They need to be able to fire employees that aren't performing, and that the agency will just be much more nimble and effective.
That's right. The problem, though, of course, is that this is a deeply, political issue. I think really that this kind of became a story, at least in my mind, and certainly for AFGE, which, as your listeners know, is the largest federal employee union with somewhere more than 700,000 members at several dozen agencies across the government, including the Department of Transportation. Why this became an issue is that this comes on the heels of a policy decision that the Trump administration tried to implement kind of at the 11th hour in the last few months of the administration.
This is Schedule F.
Yes. And
explain that.
Yeah, I think it's very relevant here because Schedule F was something that the Domestic Policy Council in the White House came up with, a very anti-labor, very smart and very well respected by the president. Guy named James Shirk came up with this. He'd come from the Heritage Foundation, and he wanted to create a system that would work for the administration, that would basically make hundreds of thousands of employees, if they had really gotten that far, essentially at-will employees who could be fired if they were not competent, or if they resisted any administration, but in this case the Trump administration's policies. And what happened there was that the Trump folks did not really get very far, simply because they started this initiative in the end of the administration, although they did identify just about everyone at the Office of Management and Budget who technically would have gone into this pot of people who would be eligible for this employment category. Then Biden came in, and of course, within a few days, he rescinded this executive order to create Schedule F. So the unions, who actually, fast forward to 8 months later, the unions learned about this effort by the Biden administration to create this infrastructure agency, and they got really wigged out, and they said, "Wait a minute! I mean, of course,
This sounds a lot like Schedule F.
It sounds a lot like Schedule F." Now, what happened was that they went to a variety of senators. They wrote a letter to every senator on Capitol Hill, and they said, "Do you realize that this is in the bill?" And I think that mostly no one really did realize that this was in the bill. Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland kind of took up the flag for the unions and for the federal employees in the DMV, and his entire state has hundreds of thousands of federal employees, and he had an amendment that he had proposed to the infrastructure bill that would have essentially not made this an entirely competitive system for hiring, but it would have allowed the employees in this infrastructure agency to be hired non-competitively, just like DARPA is, as well as the Energy Department, ARPA-E, but they would have had civil service protections.
For, say, whistleblower protections and things like that.
Exactly. So fast forward to a couple of weeks ago, when the Senate takes up the bill, and basically, because of political conflicts in the Senate, no amendments were even heard. So this agency went through as written, and right now we don't know. I think it's just sort of gone. I mean, this agency was created now that the bill is through.
Well, Lisa, we'll have to see what happens in the House. Thanks so much for coming on and sharing this with us.
Thank you. Really appreciate the time.